Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I'll declare the meeting open and begin with an acknowledgement of country. Gala Kadich Wajuk Mort, KN Kadak Nija Walila Buja, where Jinang Wajuk Katijin, where Nyitjang Bula Yeye. We acknowledge the Wajuk people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area and recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Members of the committee are on this side of the room: Councillors Sullivan, Lorber, Groom, Lang, Graham. Presiding officer, I'm Councillor Jones. Other Councillor Vucic is attending, but is not a member of the committee, but is allowed to join in the discussion. And the other people present are officers assisting the committee. Begin with apologies. We have an apology from the Mayor. She's taken ill this afternoon, and we wish her well. Leave of absence, none. Disclosures of interest by members. Councillor Graham. Can you put your microphone on, please? Have you got a Dodd?
Ah, here it is. Is that right now?
Yep. Sorry. Okay, that's item 3, so you won't participate in the discussion. Thank you. Any other disclosures of interest? Responses to questions taken on notice. I don't believe there are any. Public question time. This is for items which are not on tonight's agenda, so not for the reasons some of you have come here. So any items not on the agenda that people wish to make a statement or ask a question about. Any petitions, deputations, presentations, confirmation of minutes. I move the minutes of the Planning Committee of the 1st of June 2022. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lorber. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Any elected member communication? We haven't got an item for public question time on the agenda here. Yeah. Because there are a large number of people here to speak on item 1, I'm going to allow anybody who's here to speak on any other item, if they'd like to speak first and then leave. I'd anticipate the meeting might last up to 2 hours. Can't guarantee that at all. But if anybody, there are about 6 people here for other items. If you can choose to wait till your item comes up and then speak, or if you'd like to speak now, you can speak and then leave and watch on YouTube. Would anybody like to do that? Okay, so we'll start over here. Can you give us your name and the item number clearly? If you'd like to come up to the microphone, you've got 3 minutes. And we ask you, if you're speaking on an item that's already been spoken on, not to repeat yourself. There's about 26 people wanting to speak tonight. So if you'd like to give us your name and the item.
My name's Rebecca Carter, and I'm speaking in regards to 5 Manning Street. The item number is PC 2207-4.
Edmund Street. Sorry? Manning. Okay, sorry. And you're Rebecca Carter?
Correct.
Okay, so 3 minutes. Thank you.
Is that coming out okay? It seems very, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me along this evening to address our plan. As you're aware, I'm Rebecca Carter and also representing my husband, Jeremy Carter. In preparing for this evening, I obviously refamiliarised myself with who my councillors were on this committee, and read your profiles, and I must say, and I guess it's in context of my application, I've got a very similar background to some of you, but more importantly, I've got an ethos about Fremantle that is very much aligned with those of the councillors that are here today. And that goes for my husband and my 2 boys that I'm representing. I have a degree in environmental science and population resource technology, and hence respect the city policy and direction on inner city development. Coupled with this, my husband is a very talented tradesman with over 30 years' experience of a shipwright and currently has a fine furniture and cabinet business, and can visualise this project with the intention to ensure that the build is in keeping with the surrounds. In revitalising Fremantle's core, developing village nodes in the community is essential, bringing more residents, workers, and an increase in the CBD population. This means smart development, and I cherish the essence of Fremantle and its heritage that attracts so many. My husband and I purchased 5 Manning Street some 14 years ago. Currently a 2x1, one very huge master room and one exceptionally small second bedroom. We now have 2 boys, 10 and 12 years, and would like them to carry on attending schools in Fremantle and being able to live, walk, sports, etc. very close to home. We appreciate the streetscape and heritage value of the street we've bought in and are proud to be amongst it. Unfortunately, 5 Manning as it is today has been previously modified before we purchased it, and as the report that you've got in front of you says, a modified front fence, a modified veranda and columns and French door, and in the front of all of that, in the front, to all add to the non-heritage appeal as it looks today as a home. Please reference photo 1 in your additional information. Jeremy and I have the vision to restore what is underneath these modifications, bringing the front vista back to the 1920s cottage and discreetly place a second story on the back half of the house to accommodate our family and value add to our property and surrounds as per our development application. The staff's report has 2 main concerns with our development application: the aesthetic value of the streetscape and the overshadowing of our neighbour at number 7, who is tonight in attendance. Firstly, I would like to object to the comment in your staff's report. We'll be completely overwhelmed by the proposed addition over the main body of the original house. As per figure 2 on the agenda item report, this clearly shows our intention to utilise only the back half of the existing house to build of the second story, and hence leaving the front facade and building intact. The proposed build is over the back leg of the L shape that the report refers to, over a lean-to, which is an addition to the original cottage and existing kitchen area.
Sorry, could you draw to a close, please? You've had 3 minutes. Thanks.
That's it?
You can finish off, yeah.
Okay. I request the committee to reconsider the recommendation put in front of you. The proposed addition will, I guess I've got a lot more to say. This leads to the overshadowing, and with my neighbour here, if we, as the staff suggests, push the build further back, it's going to overshadow his backyard and living space, so it's a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Martin Cabot. Would you like to speak now or when the item comes up? Now? Okay. Martin Cabot, you're the neighbour. Yeah, so 3 minutes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Martin Cabot at number 7 Manning Street, so on the southern side of number 5. My main concern with the proposal is...
So you need to put the microphone quite close. I've measured it.
Okay.
Is it switched off?
Yeah, my main...
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Yeah, my main concern is the overshadowing of our property. With the proposal is very close to our boundary and quite tall vertically, with very little setback. So as the plan is, I would, it's the overshadowing is sort of unacceptable, and would like to see the plans altered to increase the setback of the southern wall as far as practical. That's about all I have.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak now rather than when their item comes up? Sorry, would you like to come and give us your name and the item number? Or
Thank you. It's Rob Stokes and item number 6, Elizabeth Street.
6?
Yep.
Okay, and you're Rob Stokes?
Correct.
Thank you. So you're against the officer's recommendation, like 3 minutes?
Yes.
Starting now, thanks.
Well, a bit too close. I am opposing this. The first item here that is written in, has been presented, is the, where is it? It's the unauthorised window that's already been added into, and overlooking issues, the member for or someone from council has already gone to the property and had a look and taken photos from inside showing that there is no overlooking. Now those photos are taken from within the room itself, not at the window as it shows in the R code. That distance is from the window itself. So I think that's a false representation. I can safely guarantee that we are from that room to that window directly looking at, we can see the top third of that window. So it is our belief that that definitely needs to be screened for our own privacy. It is drawn on the plans that there is a screen of some sort there. It doesn't look to be of the appropriate height and width, and it should be to maintain privacy. The other item that's been raised is the carport. It's on the boundary, and it's 3.8 metres high. How is that even considered when it should be a metre back according to what the residential the local planning policy is? It should be a minimum metre back, and no greater than, I think it was 2.8. This proposed one is 3.8 high. So I am just, how can that be considered when it's not even close to anything within the area as well? Yeah, dumbfounded by that. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I've got Christine Chandler. Would you like to speak now or later? Christine Chandler, are you not in the room? Okay. Anybody else wish to speak now? Can you come up and give us the item number and your name?
Hi, yeah, Greg Turner, and it's regarding
Edmund Street.
item 3 at 142 Edmund Street.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'll mostly have to leave the room.
Do you need to leave the questions? I don't need to leave for the statement.
Oh.
No. Okay, so it's item 3, 142 Edmund Street. You are Greg Turner, yes?
Yes.
Okay, 3 minutes, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's just regarding the height and setbacks of what they're proposing to build there, and I've had yourself down there, Bryn, to have a look at the closest proximity to the neighbouring house, and you can't even get in between the two houses to clean windows or anything. It's pushing the envelope on the site coverage by providing a rooftop, and this is and it also will impact on our privacy in our backyard because the property completely overlooks into our backyard. And I'd like to I'd like to get a dismissal of the approval until someone further, other councillors, can come down and look at the situation.
Thank you. I've got 3 other items. People wish to speak on this item. Would you like to speak now or later? Okay, thank you. Can you give us your name, please?
Hi, my name's Bridget Melanoskis, and it's item 3, and I'm 140 Edmund Street, and my concerns are the same as my partner's, Greg, which is the height of the building and the setbacks. The height of the buildings we feel have maxed out because it's a 2-storey proposal. The ceiling heights are maxed out between each level, so that when it plus the rooftop garden, the building will be excessively high for the area, and also it looks straight down into our yard. And yeah, I would like other councillors to come out and have a look. And that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2 other people on this item. Would they prefer to wait or speak now? You're Nick?
Nikki Ross.
Nick Ross?
Yep.
And you're the architect.
So I'm the architect for the proposal, and this is Rex. He's one of the clients.
So that microphone is very sensitive as how far it is from your mouth.
Is
It's
better?
or the battery goes flat. Not sure which.
Okay, shall I just use my voice? The proposal's for a two-storey new home at the rear block of 142 Edmund Street, facing onto Marty Street. The blocks on the east side of Edmund run front to back through to Marty. It's quite an unusual situation. So Marty Street forms the secondary street frontage for those homes. However, number 142 is an anomaly. We think it was subdivided back in the 1930s, so it forms a rear block to those houses. This is the only property on the block which has a primary street frontage to Marty Street. So based on the zoning and the minimum block sizes, there's unlikely to be any future subdivision of this nature in the foreseeable future. At the start of the project, we met with planning to discuss the nuances of the site, and particularly the street setback. Normally this would be clearly set by the R codes and by the local planning policy. However, as all the adjacent properties have their setback determined as it being a secondary street, this creates an inconsistency, and as a result there is no applicable prevailing streetscape. The required minimum street back for the adjoining properties is 1.5 metres, which can be done to double storey. We have developed a design which takes into consideration the current and future possible development of adjacent properties and the intent of the R codes. The proposed house is a 1.5 metre setback to the ground floor, and at first floor balcony a 2.1 metre setback to the first floor main house, and the garage setback further to reduce its presence at the street. This is consistent with future allowable development by the adjacent neighbours, who may build an addition or ancillary dwelling at 1.5 metre setback. We are asking that this site be held to the same standard, which also helps to establish a consistent streetscape. 148 has a double-storey structure with nil setback to Marty Street, and further north 138 and 136B are the newer developments. They're significant sized new homes with 1.5 metre ground level setback to Marty Street and a further setback at double storey. Just to note, there's no special allowance due to the smaller block size. The property has the same requirements to meet in regards to open space, overlooking and overshadowing as the neighbouring properties, which we're meeting. Following advertising to neighbours and meeting with the Heritage Officer, we've responded to each of the comments and taken on board the feedback and made some changes to the initial proposal. We've amended the proposal to retain the existing jarrah picket fence on the south boundary, except circa the proposed boundary wall. And the top of the south boundary wall is now raked to reduce height at the west end by 400mm. The south boundary wall is not a deemed to comply element, but meets the design principles of the R codes. It is also consistent with the more recent builds in the area that tend to have a wall on boundary to some degree, rather than a no man's land. Is that?
Thank you. That's perfect. Now, Rex, you want to speak now as well?
Sorry, I might let Rex continue for the last.
Good evening, my name's Rex Atkins. Together with my wife Lisa, we're looking to build the property on the rear of 142 Edmund. It's basically a downsizer for us. We're in a large home in East Fremantle and looking for somewhere in that South Freo Beaconsfield area. Where Nikki got up to was in regards to the spiral stair, the setback of this from the north boundary has been increased. This is now set back in line with the main north wall. The spiral stair was originally located on the northeast corner towards Marty Street. This has been moved back away from the street front to reduce the bulk of this element and to open up the corner of the balcony to reduce visual mass from the street. With these changes, both the Planning and Heritage Departments support the design and have recommended it for approval. I think the item I'd like to just ensure is understood with this block is that other owners of Edmund Street would be able to build back to 1.5 metres, two double-storey. So we're actually, there's a bit of a concession in our case in that we're not going double-storey right at the 1.5 metres apart from the balcony area. So I think that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I could just add one item, that requirements of the R codes. We're not asking for any concessions in that regard.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there is a condition in the plans to screen all the north-facing openings. Is anyone else wishing to speak before their item comes up? So if you've spoken now and you want to leave, the proceedings are live streamed. You can watch the results at home, or you can contact the officers tomorrow to find out what the result was. So thank you, those people. I'll just point out to members that are speaking that your voice is live streamed, but your face isn't. So for privacy reasons, but everything you say is recorded and broadcast live. So think carefully before speaking. Should have said that at the start. Okay, thank you. We'll just pause for a minute while we get everybody organised.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, you didn't ask if we had any questions,
Oh, I didn't.
I
did
have a question of Rebecca from Manning Street. So,
okay, sorry,
if
I'll
I
do
could
that.
do that, that would be appreciated.
Okay, sorry.
So, Rebecca had contacted me twice this week, and I've been unable to actually speak to her directly. And my understanding was that she wanted to sort of have an understanding about what would happen from here on in. Obviously, the proposal recommended for refusal, and at this stage, no member of the committee has put forward an alternative recommendation. So, my question to Rebecca, I guess, is if the refusal was going to be put and carried. I mean, we often ask applicants, are you prepared to change the proposal, or would you just like the proposal to be considered on its merits tonight? But of course, if there is a refusal and it's a delegated decision, then that decision is basically binding. So you would have to start again in the process. So I guess that question is one of process for you as to whether you believe there's opportunities to address what the officers have raised, or whether you simply want the decision to be made. So if you want to answer that, feel free to.
You need to come up to the microphone, yeah.
Sorry, I should have asked you when you were speaking, but I didn't get the opportunity.
No, sorry, that's my fault.
We have negotiated some of the plan with our neighbour in reducing heights, so we feel like we have compromised. As my talk suggested, if we push the build further back, we compromise on the size and also then more overshadowing of our neighbour, which, you know, in literally talking over the fence, I don't think is a very good outcome. We're not the only ones that have done this on Manning Street, so we feel we were surprised to see the recommendation of the staff member who was good enough to come out and meet with, with Jeremy, because I had COVID. So we feel we've done the liaison, and we were surprised at the recommendation in the report. So we would like it to be considered with what I've put forward, given it's, 10 metres by a 40-metre block. It's pretty hard not to cause overshadowing. So I would like it to go forward. I guess that's hard to say when you might have some very good alternative. It's not like we don't want to compromise, but I would hope I've put a good enough suggestion and point of view across that you'll reconsider the staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of applicants whilst we're, or neighbours? Sorry, I didn't. All right, we'll move on to item 1. There are about 20 people wishing to speak, so I'd ask you to bear in mind it's limited to 3 minutes, but most people can say what they need to say in a lot less than 3 minutes, and there's no need. And to be honest, the committee has spent a long time listening to the arguments. I think all the committee have visited the site, and we're fairly well versed with the issues, so there's no reason to repeat things, but by all means have your say, but there's no need for everybody to take 3 minutes. If you just agree with somebody who's been before, you can simply say that. I'm assuming this sheet I've been given is the order that you'd like to speak in. Is that correct? Has Ros Connor at the start? Yes. So I've got Ros Connor at the start. These are people who wish to speak against the proposal, and at the end of this list, I'll check if we've missed anyone, and then the people in favour of the proposal I'll take next. So, Ros Connor. You've got. Would you like to check the microphone and then?
Is it easier to lift it up? Bit closer.
Okay, 3 minutes starting now. Thanks.
Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to know before I start that we actually have tried to keep all of the people on point. There's actually been more people who wanted to speak than those are here tonight, and we encourage them not to be repetitive. And we've had some people not available to come up and talk personally to their points because of reasons such as COVID. So we've got some statements being read by others. Under the local planning scheme 4, your decision needs to ensure future development within each of the mixed-use zones is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. There is no document referring specifically to the desired future character of South Fremantle, but it is detailed in this, the Strategic Community Plan of 2015 to 2025. This is a good strategy. Some key words from this vision are a city that is clever, creative, inclusive, celebrates all people, a compassionate city that cares for the well-being of our people and the environment we share. It thrives on diversity and it dares to be different. The strategy details this vision into 7 strategic areas, focus areas, 27 outcomes and 66 objectives. The report by the planning officers refers to just 2 objectives of just 1 outcome. These are not worded in their entirety, and the specificity of meaning has been lost. The report refers to increase the number of visitors to Fremantle, instead of greater opportunity for businesses to attract customers. It refers to increase the number of people working in Fremantle, instead of improve the number and range of employment opportunities available in Fremantle. Missing altogether from the report, just from this specific outcome, is improve the resilience of the weekday economy and only maintain a strong weekend economy, not improve it. Systems, even strategic systems, are not designed to work favouring only certain elements. To do so unthinkingly comes at a cost to the whole. Democracies are fragile, especially when decisions are made without full and proper consideration of all the facts and consequences. You should not be making your decision out of its full context. The costs for proving this small bar are in contravention of many other objectives of your strategy important to achieving your vision. These are included but not limited to things such as increase the variety of businesses and economic diversity, enhance the health and well-being of people who live, work and visit Fremantle, create an environment where people feel welcome and safe, create an organisation culture of performance, innovation and excellence. Build on Fremantle's reputation as an innovative leader. A monoculture of drinking venues and the inclusion of another meets none of your strategic objectives. The non-reference by the planning officers to other important areas the strategic plan almost done leaves you as officers without the information you need to make sustainable, holistic decisions. I urge you to be bold, empower yourselves and innovative thought leaders and to act in support of the city's vision to set out in your plan. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll just ask members of the committee if there is any point you wish to ask questions of a speaker, just wave your arm. I won't stop every time. Jane Hammond.
Is this sound okay? Can you hear me okay? Cool. Fremantle has a reputation as a drinking destination. Alcohol has a complex role in Australian society in general. Australia is regularly reported or casually referred to as having an alcohol culture. And anecdotally, I know that Fremantle is seen by many as a place to be avoided on a Friday night in particular because of the issues arising from drunken behaviour. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a few drinks, but it's not as if I'm short of options. In South Fremantle,
just on our 1,200 metre section of South Terrace between South Street and Douro Road, there are 2 pubs, a large brewery slash bar, which is also now selling bottles of wine to take away, 5 small bars and a number of licensed restaurants. I'm sure you're familiar with the Australia's National Alcohol Strategy 2019 to 2028. The strategy tells us that 1 in 4 Australians are drinking at risky levels. Alcohol is involved in 34% of intimate partner violence incidents. It's the most common drug of concern and a leading cause of drug-related death, with more than 4,000 deaths a year. 25% of frontline police officers' time is taken up by alcohol-related crime, and we know our local police are under pressure because they are very often unable to attend when called for assistance in South Fremantle. The National Alcohol Strategy highlights actions at local, state and national levels to reduce and prevent harm. The first priority is to improve community safety and amenity by managing antisocial behaviour and noise. The second priority is to manage the availability, price and consumption of alcohol. The city now has an opportunity to play its part in the national strategy. This opportunity aligns with key aspects of the city's strategic community plan. For example, the plan has a vision for a compassionate city that cares for the well-being of our people and the environment we share. Plus the following 3 relevant objectives: to increase the variety of businesses and economic diversity, to enhance the health and well-being of people who live, work and visit Fremantle, and to build on Fremantle's reputation as an innovative leader. Adding another bar in South Fremantle doesn't align with any of these actions and objectives. Please don't pass up this opportunity to take the lead in following both national and community strategies. I urge you to refuse this application.
Thank you. Just for the further speakers, there are sanitary wipes to clean the microphone between uses. If you'd like to do that, I would recommend you do that, and just take a few seconds to do that. I've got Warren Limonas.
Good evening. I'm a regular customer at many of the current pubs, bars, restaurants and venues in South Fremantle. I know there are many options. I'm never found looking short of a seat at these venues. Expanding on Jane, there are 12 licensed venues between Douro Road and Nelson Street. That's less than a kilometre. These venues, there are more than 1,600 seats I can choose from. The only information I can find through the 2016 census, which states there are only 3,081 persons in South Fremantle in 2016. Even with an amount of growth, 1 licensed seat for every 2 residents in the suburb. Some of these residents are underage or don't use pubs and bars. I'm not against the business model, but I'm against the business model in this highly residential location. There are already other fit-for-purpose licensed venues available for lease. These venues would have less impact on the community and would not increase the number of licensed venues in South Fremantle. If the business model is going to work, it's going to work at one of these venues. I strongly urge you to reject this application, as my neighbours and I do not need any more venues to choose from.
Thank you. I've got Peter Campbell as proxy for Sally Rain. I'm not sure which way around that is. You're Sally Rain as speaking on behalf of Peter Campbell. Yes. Thank you.
Peter Campbell didn't feel comfortable standing on his feet making submissions to the councillors, so he asked me if I'd read his submission, and I'm happy to do that. So he is here in the room, but thank you. So Peter's submissions are also from his wife Sandy, and they are as follows. My wife and I have lived at 267 South Terrace, so he's 2 doors away, for 27 years now and have seen a lot of change in our community, often for the better. First concern is the noise. I start work at 6:30 a.m. and I get up at 5 a.m. and my wife does shift work at Perth's Children's Hospital. On an early shift, she gets up at 5:30 a.m. We live 2 houses from Ginger Morris, and the noise levels travel across our side fence, and more so as people are coming and going, including smoking out the front. Even with considerate customers, it's like they're in our room, and he means their bedroom, because that's at the front of the house. If the closing time is 12 p.m, and the time it takes for everyone to leave is at least usually 1 hour, it's 1 a.m. before it's quiet. We would be lucky to get 4 hours sleep, making it impossible to live here. Parking is a big problem in South Fremantle. We have parking for 1 car, he's referring to his driveway, and the other car we have to park around the corner and sometimes a block or more away. This would get worse with the customers taking the few existing parking spots that are often available. When there have been functions at Ginger Morris in the past, we have had cars parked in front of our driveway from customers to delivery drivers. The delivery drivers that use Ginger Morris's driveway park with the front of their vans and trucks blocking the footpath. One of the larger delivery trucks parked with the front all the way out into the road. Pedestrians had to step out onto the road before they could see and look for oncoming cars. This makes it very dangerous. I hope you consider the residents before allowing this small bar, as we make up a part of the vibrant atmosphere of South Fremantle. Thank you, Sandy and Peter.
Jill McKinley.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of Steve Meyer, who's at home with COVID. Steve lives in Scott Street, just behind Ginger Morris by one section. Steve would like to talk about the heritage. This block of South Terrace between Sheedy and Scott Street contains 10 properties circa 1900. 9 of these are residences. Homes of this age and style extend into Sheedy and Scott Streets. It is the most public and dense example of residential housing stock of this era in South Fremantle, and it is worth preserving. Of course, the built form of residential properties is only one part of heritage. It needs to be combined with a sense of place and the stories of community that make places meaningful for society. My parents moved to South Fremantle after World War II, refugees from East Prussia. They lived in a house with no bathroom and no kitchen. They were befriended and supported by their Anglo-Celtic neighbours till they found their feet, and Mum worked at Mills and Wares, and I have lived my whole life in Scott Street. I can tell you the names: Mr. Vag the butcher and his family from 269, Mr. Gibson the baker at 271, Miss Sheedy, the lady who the street is named after and who was born and died in the same house and was instrumental in the early union movement in Fremantle, Mrs. Williams, the Pattersons. I could go on. The importance of the individuals who lived in these homes is that they forged strong, inclusive connections and have supported each other for more than a century, and it continues today. Not to mention the tens of thousands of years of our first Australians doing the same. As you have just heard from the previous speaker, one of the impacts of the bar would be that we will be in danger of losing the residents along South Terrace, and I know that some have already moved out of the area due to the current impacts on amenity by current businesses. In the city's strategic plan, you have outcomes and objectives to preserve and promote the importance of our social capital, built heritage and history, to partner with the community to build capacity for social inclusion, connectivity and capital. You are meeting these objectives in part of South Fremantle, but you are at risk of losing this depending on your decision today. What makes conserving the strip of homes between Sheedy and Scott Street as residences, homes that are able to be lived in, is their contribution to the narrative of the importance of community and social connection in society, both from the past and for the future. Please don't pass up this opportunity to retain the residential amenity of my and my friends' and neighbours' homes. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Trish Calverley.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say I'm not a very technical person, so I'm going to speak from the heart tonight. Okay. I've lived in the development straight opposite Ginger Morris with my husband for nearly 30 years. So obviously have seen a lot of changes around South Rio in that time, mainly good ones, as we now have a plethora, I can never say it, of cafes, restaurants, bars, quirky shops, Ginger Morris being one of those and a very good one. The nightlife is situated to the north and the south, from the local and Percy Flints and down towards Truro Road, but none of those face residential properties. That leaves the central hub with a community village atmosphere and a family vibe, with kids, dog walkers, people heading to the beach, which we all love and is why we live there. Putting a bar in this vicinity will totally destroy that laid-back feeling for the residents, as it just isn't in the right place for it. I won't rave on about the bigger problems of parking and noise, but a bar is a bar, right? And will obviously create invasive noise late at night to the detriment of the area, no matter what restrictions are placed on it. And who will be there to police it at closing time? No one. Even the staff won't want to know. So I'm asking you councillors to put yourselves in our shoes and tell me this. Would you like to have a bar suddenly open up straight across the road or right next door to your house? Okay. And with all the problems that will bring? So, looking around tonight, most people here are Fremantle residents and ratepayers. We, as communities, elect our councillors to represent their constituents, look after their interests, and listen to their grievances and concerns with matters close to their homes. So, I'm asking you, from the bottom of my heart, to once again put yourselves in our shoes and listen to our concerns and our grievances and do the right thing by the constituents of South Fremantle and refuse the application with all its problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Before calling that, I will just point out we're not making a decision here tonight. We are responding to a state administrative tribunal mediation process. So whatever decision we make tonight, it goes back to that process. If both parties agree, presumably SAT will agree. If the parties disagree, SAT will make the decision. And their decision may be quite different to the decision we might have made. And that's something we can't know, unfortunately. Jeremy Bean.
Thank you. I live right behind Ginger Morris. My concern is that approval of this application attaches conditions to the property, not the applicant, and not the current business proposal necessarily. A liquor licence will inevitably follow council's approval, while any subsequent owner would have to reapply for a licence. Racing, gaming and liquor told us they essentially rubber stamp small bar approvals and expect the local council to have exercised due diligence in approving the use. So there will be a bar at 271 South Terrace long after the current proprietors and indeed all of us move on if this is approved. And a new owner or proprietor could change the character of the venue, as long as they complied with the conditions of approval. Those conditions do not say anything about the character of the venue or its contribution to this heavily residential area that we call home. Essentially, it could be a quite different business with a different clientele selling not high-end wine in a female-friendly setting, but a quite different range of drinks appealing to a quite different demographic. That is why it is a very real threat to the residential character of the area. The modest adjustments that the applicants have made to the proposal do not address this concern in any way, even if they were enforceable, which we know in practice they're not. When we moved to South Fremantle and renovated our heritage cottage, we were more than happy to share our lives with local businesses like Ginger Morris, or Balvert as it was, the B&B and the Busy Bee Laundry. We worried about the extra traffic that would come with Wild Bakery, but we understood that was what mixed use meant. Like most people buying a house, we were about to make the biggest investment decision of our lifetime. Along South Terrace, as somebody else has already mentioned, there are already 1,640 licensed seats within walking distance. But our immediate neighbourhood is different, and that's why we live there. If we knew we'd be soon living right next to a venue that operates well into the night, we may well have made a different decision. In fact, I'm sure we would have. I urge you to make a bold decision to preserve South Fremantle's distinctive character and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Kerr. I just noticed here on the list there are some people speaking on their own behalf and then speaking on behalf of someone else. I would say that's quite unusual, unless you're actually reading out a statement from another person, which is fair enough. But I think if I'm just concerned about people having multiple lots of 3 minutes to repeat themselves. I'm quite happy if you're reading out a statement written by someone else that can't be here. But if it's a matter of just having an extra 3 minutes to repeat what's already been said, I would be less happy about that. So I know there's about 4 people that have got their name down for that. So you're now speaking on behalf of Tony Rick.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Mr. Reich was unable to be here tonight and asked me to speak on his behalf, and he has given me a script to use. I would like to address the residential nature of the immediate neighbourhood surrounding Ginger Morris. The 3 blocks of South Terrace between Jenkin and McLaren Streets are the most densely inhabited part of South Terrace, and in fact all of South Fremantle. And the streetscape of this locality has largely retained its residential heritage character. Directly opposite Ginger Morris is a strata property with 15 residential units, of which I am one owner. There are 53 residential units in the Joe Sleeman Court complex at 275 South Terrace. The Biscuit Factory apartment complex has 47 units, with 16 south-facing directly towards Ginger Morris. Amongst all these larger complexes are heritage single-family properties, which are either directly adjacent, behind, or opposite the proposed bar location. Therefore, in the immediate vicinity of Ginger Morris, there are over 130 residential properties. This does not take into account residences located along adjacent streets such as Wardy, Sheedy and Scott Streets. Residents here will be impacted by increased parking and traffic congestion, poor patron behaviour and ancillary late-night pedestrian noise. As such, one licensed bar premise could have a profound impact on the use of hundreds of people's homes. Residential use allows for the ability for people to live comfortably. Amenity refers to the quiet enjoyment of your home. Residential use must be allowed for and protected. We argue that the immediate area surrounding Ginger Morris is residential in character, and to introduce a licensed bar premise into this framework will be contrary to and irreparably change its nature. The addition of a small bar, open late every Wednesday to Saturday night, will change the character and amenity of the immediate locality, and this is acknowledged in the Planning Office's report. As a current resident, I believe this is our rare chance to preserve its integrity, and I urge all council members to oppose this development application.
Thank you. Jill McKinley.
Okay, I would just like to make clear first up that I read the statement before on behalf of Steve, who's at home with COVID, and now I'm reading my own statement. I'd like to talk about who lives in South Fremantle. We're a diverse mix. Some of us have lived here all our lives and others are newly arrived. And you'll hear from some of us tonight. In our South Fremantle community, we have shift workers, carers, hospital workers, people with drug and alcohol issues, and some of this number are in active rehabilitation. People work from home, professionals who work for long hours through the week, elderly residents, young families, people with mental health issues, people with chronic health issues, and people actively fighting cancer, and a large number of people from a vulnerable section of the community. You are all aware of the petition that we submitted to Council for the December meeting and the grounds that on which people signed. 120 signatures from residents of Scott, Sheedy and Wardy Streets and adjoining areas of South Terrace. We've had barely 5 days around our busy demanding day jobs to engage with the community about the revised application. We've spoken to 30% of the signatories to the petition regarding the modest changes to the application. They did not believe their concerns had been heard nor addressed. All of these people need the quiet enjoyment of their home for rest and, in some cases, recovery. Most people who signed the petition live near the proposed small bar and do not have the option of leaving the bar and returning home to another suburb or a street outside of the bar's impact zone. For them, there will be no escaping the impacts on amenity such as noise, parking, and patrons' poor behaviour. These numbers are a strong statement of opposition from the nearby residents of South Fremantle regarding approval of yet another bar on South Terrace at number 271. In the city's strategic community plan, one of the objectives is to enhance the health and well-being of people who live, work and visit Fremantle. Yet the measures of success are limited to the number of sporting facilities, parks and gardens. Exercise is only one option of maintaining health and well-being. Enhancing health and well-being must start from the basis of preserving what people have. And for some people in our community, this is already markedly compromised. Your role as a planning committee in ensuring the amenity of our homes to rest and recover is equally as important. And no number of parks and gardens can make up for constant disruption of the amenity of our houses. I urge you to reject this application on the grounds that it detracts from your strategic objective to enhance the health and well-being of people who live, work and visit Fremantle. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia McQuaid.
Good evening. My name is Patricia McQuaid and I live directly across from Ginger Morris at 342 South Terrace. Once again, we are in front of you in regard to the proposed bar application. And though the revised application may address the specific concerns about the noise generated by the venue itself, it does not address the impact of indirect associated activities caused by the bar use on the residential property surrounding it. Local planning scheme for objective item 4 states a mixed zone use shall ensure the development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. As noted earlier, we are primarily a residential neighborhood. The commercial occupancies within our immediate area are of a diurnal nature. Wild Bakery and the Busy Bee Laundromat both open doors at 6 a.m. and already the corner is busy with activity. Our neighborhood has developed a rhythm around this early start, but by evening most commercial premises are closed and we sink into a quiet. To introduce a bar use would mean that commercial activity would run 3 days a week from 4 a.m., this is considering bakery operations, of which I have first-hand knowledge, to 10 p.m., and 2 nights a week from 4 a.m. to 12 a.m. Please keep in mind that all of the properties directly adjacent and opposite to Ginger Moore's are residential. Consider the impact of these operational hours in a residential area. What must also be considered and deemed to have equal consequence are the unmanaged noises and behaviors which occur outside the venue, but because of the venue. Patrons entering, exiting, or standing outside the venue at late hours, talking, laughing, staff arrivals, departures, and exterior prep activities increase traffic congestion and noise. These noises have not been modeled and assessed. And indeed, we experience these already, even without this bar proposal in action. A few months ago, a man who had been drinking at the South Beach Hotel smashed our bedroom window. When asked why he did it, the man with intoxicated vagueness said that he didn't know, but just felt an urge to punch something. 2 weeks ago, a nearby rave party went from 1:30 to 6:30 a.m., preventing my husband and I sleeping on a weekday workday. Multiple calls from multiple residents were made to police in complaint. The police answer was they were unable to respond to noise issues, only physical or property crimes, because they do not have the resources. You, as government leaders, have the most important and tricky task to balance the interests of the individual to the collective. I ask that you step back and ask, what is in the best interest to this community and to the overall vision? As such, I ask that you do not approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. George Watts from Herring Storer Acoustics.
Hi, my name is George Watts. I'm a director of Herring Storer Acoustics with over 20 years experience in noise impact assessments, including too many to count involving venues such as this one. I previously spoke in regard to this proposed development and the manner in which noise impacts will be managed, and have been assessed as changed in some instances since that time. However, there still remains some technical aspects that do not stack up upon inspection of the various reports, which were present previously and remain there still. As the assessments stand at present, the key for the small bar to operate in compliance with the regulatory levels, in a large part, involve management of the bar of both the alfresco area, fronting South Terrace, and the opening and shutting of the front doors and bifold windows of the bar. This management basically entails that the front door and windows are to be shut before 10 p.m. along with the alfresco area. Hence, the critical compliance period, according to the regs, is the evening period, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m, and the Sunday day period and public holidays, being from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. The acoustic report currently shows that noise levels are non-compliant operating in this manner during this period and rely on the inside of the bar being at 70% occupancy. The allowable noise level at the most impacted location adjacent to the proposed venue has been also calculated incorrectly by a factor of 2 dB. This location is listed as R1 in the assessment provided by the applicant. Accounting for the corrected allowable noise level, the proposed bar is calculated to only just be compliant with the day period noise levels. So this is Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Hence, the calculation of the correct allowable noise levels at this location is critical to the assessment. Further to the importance of this allowable noise level is the most critical time for compliance also overlaps with the opening hours of the shop, which is now part of the application. The noise impact of patrons visiting the shop has not been considered in the applicant's noise impact assessment. This further discredits the accuracy of the assessment, as the most critical noise sensitive premises considered which also has the allowable noise level incorrectly calculated, is understood to have windows that look directly into where the patrons would access the shop. Hence, it is my opinion, based on the management plan and noise impact assessment provided for the Council's consideration purposes, that the proposed small bar has shown insufficient evidence that it can operate in a way that is compliant with the environmental protection noise regulations.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Thank you. Ros Connor speaking for Sioux Tribe.
couldn't be here this evening. She had a very important prior commitment. Submission proposed change of use for Gingermorra. So I've previously submitted 2 formal objections to this proposal and cannot believe we are here again. I've lived in my house for 14 years. I love the area and all the amenities, the dog beach, cafes, etc., and the peace we enjoy. Over the time I've been here, this southern end of South Terrace has evolved into a lively, vibrant area stretching from the local all the way to Juro Road roundabout. Several large drinking venues and smaller venues that we've already heard about. The last thing we actually need is another small bar, which despite the owner's protestations, will not serve any lacking need for the community, either local or outside the area. This is a proposal purely for the wrong place. The small section of South Terrace from Wardy Street to Commercial is a particularly high residential section. Many householders, including myself, with no off-street parking, for whom day-to-day parking is already a living nightmare day and evening, caused by clients of all the existing hospitality and business venues. Why is alcohol always the go-to for new businesses? I like a drink as much as anyone, but I certainly don't want revellers at the end of my garden throughout my weekend afternoons and evenings. No disrespect to revellers, but it is ludicrous to expect no noise to emanate from happy people having fun at the Ginger Morris premises, and inconceivable that new traffic problems will not occur, even with a revised maximum of 85 patrons. I love and use the cat bus, but it stops early evening, and anyway, who goes to a bar on a bus? Please be assured of my firm objection to this proposed change of use application. The community was strongly against it last time, and people still are. I have no problem with anyone starting up a new business, but I'm sure the applicants could come up with another sort of venture not involving a focus on alcohol, which would be successful. Thank you for listening. Sue Tribe, 9 Shetty Street.
Thank you. Seb Galati.
I'd like to remind you of what I said at the last meeting, because the new proposal doesn't actually address any of my previous concerns. I'm Sebastian Galati. My partner Brooke and I are parents of 3 young girls, aged 11, 10 and 6, and our baby son Henry. We've always wanted to live in South Fremantle, a place with a strong family focus and a sense of community, a place for our young family. We found this in Scott Street. Our cul-de-sac section of Scott Street is home to 3 families with children, and with several other families within 50 metres of the proposed development. We thought this was the place to bring up our kids, and we were concerned that now we are concerned that this is under threat. That commercial gain will be prioritised over the local community. That yet another venue selling alcohol should be considered more important than the community who lives here. My biggest concern is the safety of my family. I've already observed large groups of patrons roaming the streets, talking loudly and invasively, disturbing the peace. When such people and groups are confronted by residents, it often leads to irrational and aggressive behaviour. This is very unsafe and untenable. I've seen the rubbish they leave behind and the damage that they cause to vehicles and homes. Smashed glass on footpaths is a regular occurrence. This is unsafe for my kids. It's unfair that we need to clean this up. The inclusion of another small bar will compound already serious safety issues. I think when we talk about alcohol being served at a venue and all the mitigating factors in which are trying to be imposed, there's no way that the council and anyone to that matter can completely eliminate the negative externalities that are associated with serving alcohol. We already have 2 central drinking hubs in South Freo. Why would we need to start another? Patrons spill onto the street swearing, drinking, yelling, and with complete disregard for pedestrians. My family on bikes, scooters, and in a pram need to navigate these groups as we walk into local venues for a meal or coffee. This is quite confronting for my kids. In making your decision, please keep me and my family safe in South Fremantle.
Thank you. Sally Rain.
Thank you. The officers recommend as a key means of regulating impact a condition that the bar will comply with all of the management plan. A planning condition needs to be workable and enforceable. It needs to be certain. and capable of being monitored and not require onerous supervision so that it will not be difficult to enforce. It is a leap of faith to say that adherence to all of the management plan is feasible. The plan does not contain hard stop mechanisms to ensure no detrimental impact on surrounding amenity in order to meet the high bar requirements of the relevant planning instruments. For example, counting patrons using a clicker in terms of the maximum allowable 85, instructing staff to park on Marine Terrace, not in the side streets, encouraging staff to take breaks inside, third-party deliveries to occur between 9 and 5 only, glass bins to be emptied by hand between 9 and 5 only. The applicants are in conversations with contractors about waste collection on Mondays to Fridays in working hours. Waste collection vehicles to park legally out the front of Ginger Morris. I should mention that there are no loading zones or delivery bays, and often no regular car parking bays either outside Ginger Morris. Music, no heavy metal rock, techno music with strong bass. Management will take all reasonable and practical measures to minimise overall sound level and low frequencies. These measures have good intent, but they're not readily achievable, or they are not practical, and importantly, they are not monitorable or enforceable by the city. I should briefly also mention that the proposed conditions that the officers have recommended to tightly constrain this development, including mandating all the management measures, which lack certainty, capping patrons' numbers, limiting hours, closing bifold doors, all point to this application squarely being in an unsuitable location that will inevitably lead to issues of non-compliance and land use conflict, cannot be monitored or enforced reliably, efficiently, or effectively. Secondly, I would like to raise two amenity impacts that particularly affect 269, of which I'm co-owner. As a non-smoking venue, patrons from the bar will need to go 5 minutes from the bar to smoke, meaning on the footpath outside 269 or the other adjacent resident 273. You would be familiar with other licensed premises where people smoke in small groups outside nearby venues. In this case, 5 days per week, patrons and also staff will stand and smoke outside adjacent residences. With an easterly or southeasterly wind prevailing, cigarette smoke would flow through the open door at 269. How would the councillors feel if 269 was their house and bar patrons were regularly smoking out the front? The shop is to be relocated in the old bakehouse. The wide bakehouse doors
Could
open
you draw
onto
to a
the
close,
courtyard.
please?
Won't be long. People who walk up and down the driveway, stand in the courtyard and in the bakehouse chatting will spill noise into 269. This patron noise has not been assessed. Regardless of whether it complies with the noise regs, it will have a clear impact on amenity. What if you worked nights and needed to rest
So
in
you've
the
had
day?
well over 3 minutes.
How
Now would
would
you
you
draw to a
feel
close,
if it was
please?
your house? Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman. I am speaking on my own behalf this time. The Planning Committee previously refused a similar application to this one on the grounds of incompatibility with planning requirements and the nature of the locality, impacts on adjoining and other local residents, and lack of provision for parking and servicing of the premises. Now, whilst this current application modifies these concerns, it does not resolve them, particularly from the point of view of those most affected by them. The officer report itself acknowledges this in the second paragraph on page 16, where it says, in reconsidering the use, the Planning Committee will need to be satisfied that the measures proposed by the applicant are sufficient to meet the objectives of the mixed-use zone. Now, amongst those objectives is that development in the mixed-use zone, and I quote, shall ensure that development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. Now, importantly, this does not only apply to owners or residential properties within the mixed-use zone, but to all residential properties in the locality. Equally, if we certainly if we take a literal interpretation of the wording, this is required as a condition, not optional. The words are shall ensure, not shall facilitate or some other lesser term. Approval of a small bar in this predominantly residential area, irrespective of the zoning of the specific property, would set an undesirable precedent that is likely to constrain future decisions of council, including through appeals to the State Administrative Tribunal. Put simply, the SAT will look at any future similar applications and base its assessment on this type and level of negative amenity impact being acceptable to council. It's certainly not acceptable to the local community. Many areas with mixed use or centre zonings have or are adjacent to areas of residential development with which bars and taverns are primarily incompatible. Indeed, as many of you will be aware, there is at least one development application currently in progress for which these same issues arise. Separately, and somewhat bizarrely, the next item on tonight's agenda raises similar issues in relation to a licensed premises that already exists but seeks improvements to hours of access through a certain door, and this is recommended for refusal, despite the similarity to the Ginger Morris application. I therefore urge you to oppose this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan Stewart from Row Group.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Nathan Stewart from Row Group. We're acting on behalf of the landowners of Lot 28, 269 South Terrace, South Fremantle, the neighbour to the north of the proposal. Just firstly, before I get into my presentation, I just want to quickly ask for some clarification on something. There was one point raised by the committee earlier about the SAT process, and I'm not sure this was entirely correct. The SAT has invited the city to reconsider this application. If the committee makes a decision tonight to approve the officer's recommendation or council approves this next week, if it's deferred to then, a copy of the approval will be sent to the applicant and the SAT will ask the applicant if it is happy with the approval, including any conditions associated with it. I highly doubt that the applicant will say that they are unhappy with it and want to go to a hearing. They will accept it and run to the hills and withdraw the application for a review approval in hand. So I would just like to ask some clarification on that point. Just before any response is provided on that, I'll just quickly go into my presentation, and it won't take too much longer than 3 minutes. The main issue I wanted to talk to tonight was the impact on the amenity to the occupants of Lot 28 and the surrounding area caused by the proposal from such factors as noise and lighting. In relation to noise, even if it is compliant with the noise regulations, it will still fail the consideration of Clause 67, Subclause N of the deemed provisions in the planning regulations, because of the adverse impacts of noise on the amenity of the occupants of Lot 28. This is not a test of whether the proposal complies with the assigned noise levels of the noise regulations. There are two tests that need to be undertaken, one under the noise regs and the second is the noise amenity impact test, and there are a number of SAT decisions relating to this point. The proposal will bring increased noise from traffic, cars, car doors, patrons drinking, unloading and loading of products inside the shop as well as the small bar. So this proposal cannot be supported for this reason. In relation to lighting, there is an existing limestone wall along the northern boundary between the proposal and Lot 28. There are two of the existing bedroom windows on the southern facade of this building on Lot 28, which are exposed above the height of this limestone wall. The boundary wall is approximately 1.6 metres in height, and I'm advised the top of the window frames is 2.5 metres above ground level. In the evenings and night periods that the small bar will operate, there will be light penetration into these bedrooms which will adversely affect the amenity of the occupants of Lot 28. There will also be noise from patrons visiting the shop down that courtyard. So I've provided an alternate recommendation for the committee to consider tonight to refuse this application on the basis of the reasons listed in that alternate recommendation, and I've got various copies here in case the councillors didn't receive it via email this afternoon. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I think we all received that email, yes, but we don't accept amendments from members of the public, but if any members of the committee wished to to raise that, they can. Got Lisa Barnes and Gina on the same line. Is that two? Lisa Barnes.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Lisa Barnes and I'm co-convener of the South Fremantle Precinct. We have a community group with 3,800 members and we're a voice for the South Fremantle community and people who live, love and work here. South Fremantle and its beaches are very popular, increasingly popular with businesses. It's become an entertainment hub with bars, cafes and restaurants. It's so popular with visitors, tourists and of course its residents, many who have been here for several years or decades even. It's primarily a residential area. It's a beautiful place to live with all of its parks, beaches, the community and the heart of the place. And that amenity needs protecting. Council need to act to ensure that the values that brought people here are retained. It's a very recent growth boom and it actually has literally exploded in the last couple of years. This has brought a number of issues, and one I've talked to you about. There's certain businesses that have come into the area which have not really had any, there's not been the due process in place to assess them and to make sure that they're going to be suitable for the area. Personally, Gina and myself have dealt with a massage parlour that wasn't quite a massage parlour, and that took 9 months out of our life. We've had other residents who've had issues with previous bars or existing bars in the area, and they've had those issues for a couple of years before having to go to liquor and gaming and have mediation with that business. So these new businesses that are coming into the area are not without issue, and look, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape or form that Ginger Morris is going to be the same as this, but I just think that it's very it's timely that the council actually sits back and has a look at what it wants to do for South Fremantle. Just recently we had a parking survey lobbed on in our mailboxes which hadn't really gone through any due process with council. It just came out as a survey, and this, you know, this is just one of those other things that brings the South Fremantle community to a level of anxiety, I guess, as to what's going to happen next. The duress for residents is currently quite high. So at a recent Politics in the Pub, which was last week, and Councillor Lang was at that event, we had hospitality experts in the room. And at the end of the meeting, and after some discussion, they concurred that new venues should be talking to residents directly and addressing any concerns that are raised before planning approval is granted. This includes noise, amenity and such. And what we are seeing is that new businesses are coming in and coming up with basically a decide, announce, defend mechanism of this is what we want to do, and here you go community, you're going to cop it. And whether it's you know, small bar venues, large bar venues such as what's being proposed at the Dingo, etc. around Fremantle. Now, I'm not saying that Gina and myself are pro or against this particular proposal with Ginger Morris, but we're asking that Council advocate for a strategy and actions to be developed to protect South Fremantle and other unique areas of Fremantle and the beautiful places that they are. The strategy for South Fremantle and reform of relevant strategic docs and local planning scheme to ensure that South Freo and its residents' rights are protected, and that this needs to be done in consultation with the community and businesses, not just another decide, announce, defend mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina, do you wish to speak as well? Or? No. Thank you. Two people to speak in favour of the proposal, Declan Cregan and Tim Dawkins. Anyone who would like to go first? You are Declan. Okay, got 3 minutes, thank you.
Good evening, elected members. My name is Declan and I'm a town planner from Urbis. Whilst I am representing the proponent for the application tonight, I'm also a South Freo local. I'm a young member of the community and I'm deeply passionate about my local area. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm speaking in favour of the officer's recommendation. And firstly, we'd like to say a sincere thanks to the city staff for all their hard work over the past 6 months. We're genuinely very appreciative of their efforts and feel they represent the city in a very positive manner. We're really pleased with the officer's recommendation for approval. The project team have worked tirelessly over the last 6 months to arrive at this situation. We feel we've put in place every reasonable measure to address the key issues. Tonight, I want to address the key changes that we've made to this application. Firstly, the impacts to amenity. The officer's report notes that the key amenity issues with the former application were the intensity and scale of the proposal. There was ambiguity over what the proposal was about and how it would be managed, the potential noise generation and the impacts to the neighbouring properties, and the impacts of patron activity and movement, particularly during sensitive hours. We accept that these issues needed addressing, and the amended application has been refined to address these concerns. We've significantly reduced the scale and intensity of the proposal. It's now an 85-person maximum venue, including the alfresco area. This is down from 120, which was the previous application. So at any one time, if there's 15 people in the alfresco, there can only be 70 inside. We've also reduced the operation to 5 days. Monday and Tuesday, it's closed. Wednesday, Thursday and Sunday, it closes at 10. And only on Fridays and Saturdays, it's open past 10, which is a reasonable expectation for a small bar. And to further protect the amenity, patrons will be ushered in from the alfresco from 9:30 on all nights, and the alfresco will be closed from 10 p.m. onwards. Acoustic attenuation measures have been added to the development plans to address the peer review that was provided to us. The extensive built form changes have been documented on the development plans to ensure that they occur. And additionally, the condition recommended by the officers to close the only operable window and the front door by 7 p.m. every night, it ensures additional management of noise spill. There's only one way in and out of the venue, and that's via South Terrace. And patrons will also have no access to the rear courtyard area for the small bar. We feel that these measures, along with the diligent management plan, addresses the key impacts to amenity. So to conclude, everyone speaking on this item tonight, whether for or against, really cares about South Freo. We love to live here, and we want the great lifestyle maintained. But we don't think this application threatens what makes living in South Freo great. It's managed, well thought out, and celebrates what the best of South Freo has to offer. I hope one day everyone can come and enjoy this amazing small bar. We respectfully request that the elected members adopt the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Lawther? It's not showing up on here.
There we go. Just wanted to ask, the alfresco component is actually not being considered here tonight. And there is more that could be done to limit the noise impacts. And I was just wondering, just kind of your general feeling about taking some additional steps to mitigate those noise impacts, such as keeping that one window closed all the time, maybe not having alfresco, and doing more to mitigate the impacts of the noise from the door opening and closing.
We are well aware that there are additional processes to go through for the alfresco, so we entirely understand that approval of the DA tonight does not mean that we can just go and use the alfresco, so entirely appreciate that. We've also discussed with the city's alfresco permits team and have a bit of an understanding of how that process will operate. Certainly think that we'd be open to further discussions on how the alfresco can be managed. Ultimately, we think it would be an important part of the small bar, so we'd like it maintained. However, we would be willing to continue to refine and think about how it can operate effectively.
Just to clarify for members of the community, the alfresco area is not part of the application because it's not part of the applicant's land. So the alfresco area is always considered separately as a license by the council. So that whatever decision we make tonight, the alfresco area won't be part of it. That will be part of a separate application. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Tim Dawkins. Now, I think you're speaking on behalf of the applicants as well, so I'll just give you longer rather than have two separate goes, if that's okay. No. Anybody got any audio?
Hello, check. Oh, there we go.
That's right.
Good evening, elected members. My name is Tim, and I'm from Urbis. The mediation process. Pardon me, I should wipe this afterwards. The mediation process has been really rewarding. It has given us a chance to go through the plans and refine the proposal as Declan described. It's been really great to be able to talk to the other residents who turned up and were able to actually engage with us and participate in that process. In addition to Declan's comments, I'd like to provide a few other clarifications. Much has been made about the other bars up and down South Terrace, and one that I know is a big issue is Percy Flint. We went back and looked at the approval for Percy Flint. It was granted in 2012 with 4 conditions. Percy Flint is allowed to have 120 people. It operates to midnight 6 nights a week. Sorry, 5 nights a week. 6 nights a week, and doesn't open on Tuesdays. Closes at 10 on Sundays. So it has a much different arrangement. There's no requirement for a management plan. They didn't lodge with an acoustic assessment, and it has a big outdoor area in the garden. We've learned a lot from that process, and hopefully the council in the last 10 years have also learned from that process that these things need to be done properly, and they need to have conditions that can control them and can be managed, and that's what we're trying to put forward tonight. It's important to note that this isn't a residential area. It's been talked about people saying it's a residential area. It's not. There's residents in it. It's a mixed-use zoned area. Mixed-use zone goes all the way from Juro Road up to Rose Street on both sides of the road. It's not until you go past Rose Street that one side of the road becomes residential, and then up towards the hospital further, there's portions where both sides are residential. But in this portion, from Rose all the way down to Juro Road, it is a mixed-use area. A mixed-use, a small bar, is an as-of-right use in a mixed-use zone under the deemed provisions where it's a D use. This is an A use, which is a D use that requires advertising, so it's effectively a D use. That's suggesting that the amenity expectations in a mixed-use zone are you should be able to expect to have this type of use. That you no longer even need to apply for them in most circumstances. We also talked about the previous SAT cases that came before the City of City of Fremantle at the last meeting, and there was talk about the mixed-use zone and the expectations of amenity. And I also note that the conversation slightly changed. The paid planning consultant no longer talks about the venue not complying with the noise. They're now saying it complies with the noise, but it might have amenity impacts. That's a different story than they were telling us last time, because we've done the work to get to where we need to be. Yes, the fresco area is an important part of the application, but it's not being approved tonight, and we need to go through other things to prove that up. But our acoustic assessment says that it will comply, and it can comply with 15 people so long as they're brought inside at certain times and management plans are adhered to. What I suggest tonight is that this is the last opportunity, I guess, for the council to actually approve this. Well, because otherwise it goes back to SAT. So what we want to see is the council approve this. We don't want this approved by SAT. We want this approved by the council with suitable conditions. So the conditions that have been applied are far more detailed than the ones that are applied to Percy Flint. And we think that there can be even more conditions if the council feel they're needed to manage it. Conditions are there to control the development and and to make sure that we behave in the right way. So I think, a condition such as the alternate recommendation to have the doors shut and the windows shut permanently would be better to have a post-occupancy noise attenuation, so we can actually prove that our noise report is appropriate and it is meeting the regulations, and if it doesn't, we need to stop doing what we're doing. Those are the sorts of things the council can do to support the use, but also ensure that we're not exceeding the limits, and it is controllable. The conditions can bring us into line with whatever the council need us to do.
Give about another minute,
sure.
please.
Look, I think that's really it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but look, we've really worked very hard. We've acted in good faith. We've seriously constrained the development beyond what was originally approved, or originally applied for, and we've spent 6 months ensuring that we do give the council confidence that they can trust this will be a good venue. A lot have been talked about the inappropriate behaviour and things like that. That's a liquor licensing consideration. We haven't got a liquor license yet, but the small bars were brought in to stop the bad behaviour of the big bars. And so hopefully this, if approved, will actually improve the behaviour on South Terrace, because it's bringing in smaller people, smaller bars and other things that will help the behaviour around the town. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Oh. No, thank you. Check there's no one else left to speak that wasn't on either of the lists. Well, you can speak as part of the committee, Councillor Visage. We'll go into committee. We don't take any further contributions from the public once we go into committee. So I will move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sullivan. Any discussion? Councillor Lorber.
There was some consideration about doing a deferral or referral to full council, and that was deemed that we couldn't actually do that tonight because of the SAT deadline. So I just wanted a few amendments prepared, but I only want them prepared in the event that this is actually going to be considered. So I'm under the, can I move a minor amendment? My question is right now to see if there is appetite for actually approving this, and if the minor amendment is approved, then move my motions after we move on to debate. How does that work?
Well, yeah, let me just think about that. Let's just bring all the committee up to speed. If the council's response to SAT has to be, or is required to be, by the 13th of July, which is before the next council meeting. So if we don't, and to make a decision tonight, we need at least 5 people in favour. So there is a likelihood that we won't make a decision. I don't know. I can't predict that. In that eventuality, the officers would have to ask SAT for an extension of 1 week, 8 days or thereabouts, 12 days, to consider the item on the day after the council meeting. We expect they would grant that, but we can't know. The applicants have said they wouldn't oppose that informally, but that's something we can't know until we do that. But if we don't make a decision tonight and it goes to council, where the only way council consider it is if SAT allows an extension.
So I guess before we vote on the staff recommendation, can I move a minor amendment as a way of flagging a potential vote on the motion, but in advance of me moving my amendments?
I think you can move the amendment. That's not a problem. Then whether that is supported or not, it becomes part of the decision or not, and that either gets decided tonight or goes to council. So just move it as a normal amendment. And is this the one you've got on the paper or a different one? Well, you've given adequate notice, so you can move it normally. Do you want to do that now? Just give us a second. So you're referring to the additional condition on the window and the door?
That's great. I guess if it does go to full council eventually, we can always choose to strike those provisions at full council. So I guess yes.
No, you should move it now, because if this committee approves it, then it goes to SAT.
Okay. Yes, I would.
It's only if this committee can't reach a decision that we need the extension. Okay.
Sorry. Thank you for helping me through that.
To do that now, or
yes.
So that's the additional condition on the additional documents, which I think we can get on the screen, but I'll read it out. Prior to the issue of a building permit, the approved plans and management plan shall be amended to demonstrate the permanent closure of the bifold window on the front elevation and the inclusion of an airlock entry to the small bar. The work shall be installed on site and maintained for the life of the development to the satisfaction of the City of Fremantle. Is Is there a seconder for that? Seconder for that amendment? Councillor Lang. Okay, we've got that on the screen now. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Lova?
Yes, thank you. I just put this forward in the event that this does get approved this evening, because as we heard tonight, there's a lot of concern about the impact of noise and on the amenity of the neighborhood. And as one of the acoustic engineers mentioned this evening, the alfresco and the doors and windows up front were a large source of that concern. So this would go a long ways to helping mitigate any ambient noise, making sure that it's all kind of sealed within the building. And this would be in addition to all the other measures that were included in the report. Um, the, the mixed use zone, basically approving any use, it does say that we need to ensure that the future development in mixed use zone is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. And I think this amendment would go a long way to preserving the character that we want to see there. And then also the mixed-use zone, it says it shall ensure that development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. So to achieve those two aims, I think this would go a long ways to helping that if it is approved.
So there are two amendments on the additional documents. We're only discussing the first one at the moment, which is is any further speakers on that amendment? Councillor Graham?
Oh, it's just a question through the chair. Thank you. Could we, because it's only come up late, can we get some officer comment on this regarding what actually an airlock entry to a small bar is and how it impacts on the current application and written up approval? And would we need to perhaps seek something from the applicant represented tonight to see if they understand it and are agreeable to it? So it's a question, it's not my comment.
Through the chair, the condition was provided to the applicants this morning for review. I'm not sure if they were wanting to comment on that at all. Effectively, an airlock is just a double door. So you enter through one door and there's another door before you enter into the bar. It is quite a constrained area though. So it will be tricky for them to build, but not impossible. It just adds further expense and works to the plans as designed.
Thank you. Councillor Vucic?
So it's okay for me to say my...
You can speak in the same way as a member of committee. You simply can't vote.
Thank you. I would just like to thank everybody from South Fremantle for coming here on this particular issue. I just wanted to also note that although we're...
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we're talking on only the amendment at the moment. Okay, I don't know whether Councillor Vucic is talking on the whole item, but I think we just should stick to the amendment.
Sorry, yes, if you want to save that. Do you want to speak specifically on the airlock or the window?
No.
Okay, sorry. We'll come back to you later. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Chair. My decision tonight on this amendment and also on the motion as a whole will be very much based on the science that's been presented to us. And in relation to the window and the proposed airlock, what we are seeing is the applicant basically acknowledging that 7 p.m. And 10 p.m. are times where the expected requirement for noise for residential areas changes, and they have offered to close those windows at 7 p.m. Now, most of the other venues that actually also do the same thing in South Fremantle, they close theirs at 10 p.m. So this small bar is going one step further with the proposal for 7 p.m. Now, I would be gobsmacked if the noise that came from that venue during the day was significantly higher or even got to the level of the existing noise that exists in South Fremantle. And I've been living there for 37 years. So I kind of like know when it's noisy and when it's not. And it is quite quiet at night time after 10 p.m. And it is reasonable for people to expect that amenity to occur. But during the day, it's actually quite a noisy environment. And so I just don't see that it's fair to say to any person, whether they be a resident or commercial owner, that they can't have a window open during daylight hours. I mean, I almost, I didn't really want to say this, but it almost felt like saying, oh, if you've got a baby that cries, you can't have a window, because it's that sort of level of punity on the proposal. It's not, the noise regs are very, very clearly in favour of residential amenity. And to end up with a situation where windows are being closed at 7 p.m. is really extreme compared to any other situation I've seen in commercial developments, either in Fremantle or elsewhere. So I think to suggest that the applicant needs to go another step is beyond the pale from my perspective. Let the science of the noise regs rule the day, because that is, whatever we do in this room today, it doesn't overrule the ongoing, everyday requirement that everybody complies with noise regs. Nothing we do, nothing we approve today stops that from happening. And that's something that we really need to be clear about, because if, as was suggested by one of the speakers, and it's not an unreasonable point to make, if the venue started and a year later it was sold, or they suddenly decided to make it a margarita bar, and the only thing you could ever buy there was a double smoked mezcal margarita, and you were required to have many of them, even then, I think the 7 p.m. closing of the windows would be a pretty fair planning measure to ensure that type of operation didn't impact in the hours when quiet enjoyment is actually starting to be promoted by the noise regs. That's where it starts to be promoted, 7 p.m. At 10 p.m., it escalates significantly. So let's accept that they're the sort of ground rules and not try and impose more punitive measures than what actually already exists in a fairly favoursome set of noise regulations.
Thank you. Any further comments on the amendment? Ready to vote? Councillor Love, would you like to close?
Yes, please. I thank you for those comments, Councillor Sullivan. I think this was just intended to alleviate any sort of noise spillage or any sort of potential future, creeping of oh, we got to keep it open until 10 or we got to keep it open until 11, coming before the committee, and just being very clear that not only does that keep the noise away from the neighborhood, but it would also keep you have a nice quiet environment to go have your double margarita in. You wouldn't have the street noise, creeping into the bar. So it'd be a nice quiet bar where you could go have your double margarita or whatever they're serving. So it's just one extra step that I feel would be appropriate, and I think that it would be a good thing for the place. Thanks.
Okay, so I see the votes in favour of the amendment. That's to close the window and install a airlock doors. All those in favour? Councillors Love and Lang in favour. All those against? 4 against, so that's lost. Would you like to also move the additional advice note?
Yeah, let's just be clear about the al fresco and that we're not.
I'll just read it out. Council advises that it does not support an al fresco dining permit at these premises due to the potential impact on the amenity of nearby residential properties. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Groom. Okay, would you like to speak, Councillor Lorver?
Sorry, it's pretty clear. Thank you.
You don't want to speak on that one? No. Councillor Groom? No. So we'll go straight to a vote. All those in favour of that? That's purely an advice note, by the way. It's advice to the officers responsible for alfresco dining. So all those in favour? All those against? That's lost. You got the votes? It's been moved and seconded. Can I see a speaker on the motion? Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Last time when the applicant presented on this bar, I really liked the concept, and I think you run a great business in South Fremantle, and I believe you'd run a great bar. I'm just challenged by 2 points on it, really, and that is it's the location. That hasn't changed. It's surrounded by residential. And the other point is, now that we've brought in so many restrictions, I'm worried that we'd be setting you up to fail. You wouldn't be able to operate a business in the manner that it deserves. So I love the concept and I love the business you run at the moment. If you're going to have a bar, I just would like to see it. Is there another place you could do it in Fremantle is what I was hoping. As it stands, I can't support the location and I'm worried we're setting you up to fail.
Any further? Councillor Bush, you'd like to speak now?
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to go over a lot of information that was presented this evening, but as a South Ward councillor, I empathise with the community that are here to speak against the motion. I can't speak in favour of it, but there's 2 points I want to make. I think we've addressed antisocial behaviour, we've addressed all the amenities we would expect a normal community that has a diversity of people living there. There is a tipping point in South Fremantle. It's been coming for some time. And I believe it is the Ginger Morris that will be the tipping point. There are so many things that and Councillor Lang has identified the restrictions and the conditions that we're putting on this particular business. That in itself is an indicator. We have reached a tipping point in South Fremantle. It is a residential area. Where I live at the top end of South Terrace is different if you live down at Scott Street and the surrounds. It is somewhat different. We've already had established businesses there for decades. And when you buy into that part of South Fremantle, you know what you're buying into. I think that's a really big consideration. The other one is the SAT process. And as a first-term councillor, I don't purport to know a lot about planning. But can I ask a question? If it's going to need to go back to SAT, if this council so chooses, and if can they put in a report which basically summarises the statements and the concerns and the arguments put forward by the community this evening?
Through the chair, Councillor Burgett, if it did end up at a full hearing, part of the process would be to provide a package of documents that included the council reports, minutes, content of submissions and the like. So that would all form part of the package that went to the SAT member who presided over the hearing. So ultimately, yes, there would be a clear outline of what happened leading to that point and what level of objection there was from the community.
Thank you. And I just want to make another couple of points. If Ginger Morris is going to be our tipping point this evening, the consequences are such that we can't go back, not easily. So I certainly, that would rest heavily for myself. I think also SAT is a state government organisation. I think we should speak for ourselves as a local government. and we should represent our community strongly on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the proposal? Councillor Groom?
Yeah, so very similar to Councillor Lang, a great business and a great idea, but I've never been able to reconcile where it is and that it's the right activity in that spot. And I've certainly spent a lot of this week kind of reflecting on that and reflecting on the work that has been done to try and make it more tenable in the location. But you know, mixed use really does mean mixed use, but it means it across the entire of South Terrace. And I've ran this before. It doesn't mean that we turn South Terrace into an entertainment strip. It means we have to retain residential in the mix of both South Terrace and South Fremantle and encourage other mixed use activity in, which means leaving the opportunities for that mixed use to develop and thrive. I can't be convinced that the noise impacts around the venue can be satisfactorily managed whilst the noise inside can be contained. And, you know, it is a wine bar. People aren't going for a quiet feed and a glass of wine because, you know, we're being told that it's not really a food venue, and 70 people in a pretty small shop is a lot of people. So there will be that associated activity in and around the street and the noise that goes with that. And I just can't reconcile that that is the right kind of activity and noise in this part of the South Terrace mix.
Councillor Graham?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, yeah, I won't say too much, but it really is an amenity issue for me as well. Just thinking a little bit abstractly on this one, this would be a good swap here would be Abbey's Bread or Manor Wholefields to move to this side and Ginger Morris to move down to a more area where this would be more compatible. I don't know whether anyone can do that or not, but to me that would make more perfect sense. But it's the location, it's the amenity, and it's the concerns of the residents that will sway my vote on this one.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. The way our planning system works is we zone areas for certain types of activity. And that is done through very extensive processes. Now, for a very long time, the people in South Fremantle moving in, the people that were there, have had and have known about and have participated in developing South Terrace as an area of a mixed-use zone. It's always actually been a mixed-use street. It's actually always been a mixed-use suburb. It's probably less mixed-use now than it was when I moved in 37 years ago. It's just that the uses that were biscuit factories and wool stores and cold stores and crayfishermen and the like have been replaced by uses which more directly serve the local community, being bread shops and the like. We've gone from mainly a few restaurants and probably too many butchers, probably too many Indian restaurants and the like, to it trying to find its right balance. Now, what I absolutely acknowledge is that that balance is skewed at the moment, and that there is a way to go to really achieve the right balance. And that it's because, you know, we have made some mistakes, but we have also, as a community and as a council, progressed the sort of South Fremantle that I know that a lot of the people who I've associated with over a very long period of time have actually actively encouraged. And you don't always get it right, and you don't get to pick and choose in the way that I've just heard some elected members suggest. Can we swap this, development for that one down the road and the like? It doesn't work that way. We get greyness in the system. We get imperfection. That's part of that's part of what South Fremantle is about. I don't get to choose my next door neighbours. I don't get to choose whether they made cray pots at 3 a.m. in the morning, which they did. I don't get to choose the coffee shop that opens at 5 a.m. or the rubbish truck that comes at 6 a.m. or the fact that the commercial property that used to be the crayfishermen is now full of backpackers and they like to party at 12 midnight after they get home from their hospitality work and pretty well party through to 3 a.m. We don't get to choose every aspect and every perfect outcome, because if we did, South Fremantle wouldn't be the diverse environment that it is. It wouldn't have the things that were talked about in our planning scheme and in our strategic plan of the diversity, of the variety of businesses. It wouldn't have that economic diversity, because we would find a reason not to do virtually all of the things that already exist in South Fremantle. I have to look at this proposal in the context of the scheme, the scale of it. As Councillor Vucek is suggesting, is it the tipping of the iceberg? That's not really a planning measure. I can look at it and go, compared to, say, the other venues, compared to, when the Seaview Hotel became the South Beach, sorry, the Davalac became the South Beach Hotel, it shrunk significantly from being the traditional pub that it was to virtually, I think, a restaurant / small bar. And then it changed its bottle shop into a much larger bar. There was a demand for it. So it went, well, why not? We'll satisfy that demand. It's now bigger than it was when it was a traditional pub. And the same thing happened at the Seaview, which is now the local. It had a couple of bar rooms and it had a band room back then. And now when Pav had it, he put a restaurant out the back. And so it actually has a lot of those spaces. It never had al fresco. Neither did the Davalac in the day. Now they have huge areas of al fresco. So is it fair when the planning scheme says that this is allowable, that mixed use actually encourages this type of business? Is it fair that we say that because we've allowed a huge amount of al fresco at 3 very big venues, that we won't allow a small bar, a small wine bar, a very, very small bar to go ahead? Now, it is reasonable to say, is it in the right location? It is certainly significantly smaller than everything else that's a liquor license down that way. It is reasonable to question whether it can be accommodated in this location. And that's what this entire process has been about. That's what all the pain has been about, going through the science. And so I get back to that. I get back to that question of the science and whether the applicant has demonstrated the physical aspects of being able to contain the noise generation, the management generation, and the like to an extent that is acceptable. And that's what we're here to decide. And for me, with the recommendations and with the information that's in front of me, the extent to which this venue will be managed goes and controlled in terms of the physicality of what they're going to put in terms of sound attenuation and management practices and the like, goes so much further than every other venue, including the restaurants in South Fremantle. And it would be, and I would hope it will become, the model for this council in terms of future approvals. Because it is true that we haven't got it right. It is true that venues like Percy Flint's have not only gone well beyond what they were originally anticipating to do, but have also flouted their regulations. They've been opening for Tuesday for a very long time, as we all know. They're now closing on Tuesdays because they've been told they have to. So there are things that we can do as a community to improve the situation in South Fremantle, but refusing a proposal that shows us the way forward in terms of delivering these types of activities, by refusing that, we actually, in my opinion, we accept the failures and ignore the solutions. And I would very much urge you to try and see this as being the type of resolution, the type of proposal, the type of management approach that we need to adopt for all of the other venues and all of the other future proposals coming forward to us in South Fremantle.
Thank you. Councillor Lawler?
Thank you, Chair. There is no doubt that the proposal before us is miles in front of the one that we saw in December as far as mitigating the noise and the impacts. But in my opinion, it still does not go quite enough for this part of South Terrace. And I'll just circle back, and I'm new here, but circle back to the regs that they say about the mixed use zone. It shall, which is not discretionary, it shall ensure future development within each of the mixed use zones is sympathetic with the desired future character of each area. I don't know if that means the whole South Fremantle strip or if that means each little area, but I agree with the comments by Councillor Groom that we have to preserve the character in those areas and as a whole, not as specific things. It also, our regs say that we need to ensure that the development is not detrimental to the amenity of adjoining owners or residential properties in the locality. And while I do appreciate the work our wonderful staff have done to try to mitigate those impacts and the way that's going, in my mind, it could go another step further. So for those reasons, I can't support this as put before us right now. I really wish that we could do some more work on it, but I'll be not voting in favor of it. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Vucic?
I just want to make a comment on Councillor Sullivan's reference to science and noise. There is a justification for that those types of businesses to some degree from Orient Street to Douro Road. It is already saturated. I can also say to you, living in those businesses, it's a delicate balance. And every so often, actually quite frequently, the residents have to get together to pull the businesses in line. So that delicate balance I would not like to see replicated down South Terrace and start off another block of strip of small bars and its impact on the amenity of people that live there. I don't think we need it. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? We'll close the debate. Well, I'll just close by saying that I agree with most of the committee in refusing this, and I would point out that that's only our recommendation to SAT. And sadly, in a way, because it is a very well thought out proposal, but it just, when you look at the constraints, the size of the lot, the proximity of the neighbours, the waste management issues, and all of those things, I just think it's it's probably just too difficult to manage and would probably end up having the base of complaints regularly. I do, however, dissociate myself from the comments made by Councillor Vucic. We have to consider each application on its merits, and recommending refusal of this particular licensed premises has no bearing at all on the way we consider any future licensed premises on South Terrace or anywhere else. If we did that, we'd simply abrogated our responsibility to apply the town's planning scheme. So, having said that, I'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, which is for approval? Councillor Sullivan. Those against? So that is a decision by delegation tonight. So that is the recommendation that goes to SAT. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, what you have is a no decision.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, got it wrong. So shall I? I'm just going to ask for clarification because we don't have an alternative motion for refusal. So we're going to discuss the process from here.
Through you, Chair, given the circumstances and the deadline set in the SAT order to provide a reconsidered decision by the 13th, I think it's the 13th of July, whilst ordinarily the meeting procedures policy would require advance notice to be given of an alternative motion. I think in the circumstances, if the committee wants to entertain an alternative motion of refusal to debate and vote on tonight, that would be appropriate. I've checked that with the CEO and he's in agreement with me on that. We have quickly put together a reason that could be a motion that effectively is a motion that the council through the planning committee reaffirms its original decision on this application and the reasons for that, and then that if it were carried by sufficient votes tonight to be a delegated decision of the committee would become the reconsideration that the SAT will be advised of.
And the alternative is to ask for an extension at SAT and to go through all this again at the full council meeting. So I would propose I'm allowed as chair to exercise discretion to accept a motion without notice. So I'll do that, and I'll ask the staff to draw it up. We'll just maybe that's an appropriate time to take a 5-minute break if people want to do that, or the staff draw up that motion. Thank you. You got it? Oh, okay. Sorry, we've got the motion already. We'll do that first. We'll take a break after this item. Okay, so we'd like to. Okay, is that all of it? Reaffirm the decision of the Planning Committee, December 2021, to refuse the development for the same reasons previously listed, based on the updated plans dated 27 May 2022. So I'm guessing I will move that as a seconder. Councillor Graham. And is there any need for any further discussion?
Can I just ask a question about because the SAT process is one that's new to me as well. If we're just reaffirming the previous, reasons, should we not have a new reason on there that takes into account the new plans, or are we okay with this?
I would suggest that's covered by amenity.
To clarify, the 27th of May is the updated plan, so it makes reference to the fact that council has considered the updated plans. Previous reasons for refusal were fairly broad in that they referred to the zoning and the amenity, so they probably don't need to be updated unless there was something specific that you wanted to mention, but that does make reference to the fact you've looked at these plans.
Okay, is everybody ready to vote? So all those in favour of the refusal? That's 5 votes against. Councillor Sullivan, so that is a decision by delegation tonight.
I move that it goes to full council.
Sorry?
Would support it going to full council.
Is there anybody else who would support that? Okay, so the committee has the option to ask for an item to go to full council, so that's been requested and approved. So we'll now need to ask SAT for an extension, which we'll do tomorrow. So is that clear what's happening? We're asking either SAT makes a decision on the 13th of July without any input from the council, or SAT accepts an extension of time and then the decision will come from full council to set. So I appreciate that's complicated, but that's the best we can do. Thank you for your attendance. We'll just take a 5-minute break, I think. Any alternative motions in?
Well, no.
So we'll just, if they're talking like, we'll defer to council. Sorry?
Really annoyed that.
Sorry?
Really annoyed that.
Well, I was counting the numbers carefully. I thought if I vote against this, it won't have to go to council. We won't have to go to us again.
And that backfired, didn't it?
Well, it would have gone to council anyway if I hadn't voted against it.
Well, yeah. Either, well, yeah.
No. It would have had to go to council if I hadn't voted against it. Because I figure sets. Are we still all right, are we all ready to start? Thank you. All ready to reconvene? So there are, as far as I'm aware, no other speakers, so we'll just take the agenda in order. So item 2 is Orient Hotel 39 High Street. Request to change the restrictions on the opening hours of the doors facing Henry Street. Officers are recommending a refusal. I'll move the officer's recommendations for a seconder. Councillor Lorver, any discussion? Councillor Groom, you have an amendment or an alternative?
Well, I did think the proponent might be here to speak up for themselves, but they're not. I'll make my comments, I guess my reflection, and then maybe we can think about whether it is worthy of a referral. So the proponent put forward several examples of other bars that have different operating or different restrictions on doors and the like. And it's very apparent that there is no consistency in how we apply those conditions, and kind of not even any logic, or we don't have a framework around it. Some of the examples the proponent put forward didn't feel comparable to their situation. They're either a much smaller venue or in an area that really isn't adjacent to residential. But one of them was very similar, which is the Ball and Chain, which is a bar. It's part of the Esplanade Hotel. Its door opens directly opposite some residential development, and it's a venue that forms part of a larger complex. And so I wondered whether the proponent would want to reconsider the hours they had put forward, which were nothing like the hours of the Ball and Chain, but that the Ball and Chain hours might come some way closer to meeting their need. So I was going to suggest, have a dialogue with the person who's not here, that we may refer it back to the administration with the opportunity for them to reconsider the hours they were asking for, to extend them slightly from what they've currently got, but still be appropriate to the residential nature of the area that is being impacted.
So you're foreshadowing that, but not moving it at this stage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
See if there's any other discussion.
Councillor Lang.
Thanks. If there is a referral, I will support it. I've been to the venue and met with the operator, and I can see the dilemma that they've got. They're operating two clearly distinct venues within the one venue, and I can see that patrons trying to access or leave one of the venues must pass through the other venue to get there. And I can see that's inhibitive to people that might want to pop in there. I can't stress how different the two spaces are. If anyone else has been to visit them, I encourage you to have another look. So if there was a referral and we could come up with something that fit the residents and the two venues, I think we could find a good common ground.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I actually, thanks, Councillor Lang, for that. I have actually been to a function there, and that's primarily what this section is. It's a function centre. It's a function room, and it's very well run. It's very private. It's got a great atmosphere. If Councillor Sullivan could have had his 60th birthday even. It's how good it is. He may have wanted to have done that, but it looks like he's a bit grumpy about being 60, but anyway. So I've got a bit of sympathy for this application to change the times, because it is different to the Ball and Chain. The Ball and Chain is a pub, and this isn't actual part of the pub in respect as the front bar or the music bar. And I do recall leaving most probably around 11 o'clock at night. You're trying to get out the door where you came in, and it's all boarded off and blocked off, and you think, well, where do you got to go? Then you've got to go and ask the barman how to get out, and then you've got to go through a rabbit warren to get to the main section of the bar, and then you've got to fight through everyone to get out to High Street, which is from here to Mr. Kingdom away, from where the front door is. So, I mean, that's just my experience down there, and I think we should perhaps either defer it to give them a chance to perhaps have a trial period on this. I mean, I don't know. I'm not keen to go straight for a refusal, and I don't know whether Councillor Groom's referral goes as far to be a little bit sympathetic to it from my point of view anyway. So Yeah, I'm a bit of a quandary on it, but it's
Sounds like there is some support for a referral. Would you like to move that way? So it's moved by Councillor Groom. It's in your additional documents, seconded by Councillor Lang. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I just had a query that perhaps could be dealt with during the period of a deferral, and that's why I'm raising it now. Is my broad recollection was when we approved this venue, it was a functions venue, and it's been in this report, it's been suggested it's run as a bar as well as a functions venue in terms of that particular space, and that kind of came as a bit of a surprise to me. And we've talked a lot tonight about what happens when change of management or change of style or change of ownership, and whether or not it actually has approval for operating as a bar. I suspect the answer is we don't distinguish between it being a functions venue and run as a normal bar. And I suspect the exact same problem is what we're going to get at Madalena's down in South Fremantle, which I also understood was approved for functions and is now a full-scale bar. So perhaps we could get some clarification on what was approved and whether it's operating within a reasonable earshot of those approvals. But also, I think that goes a long way also to understanding whether or not to grant some dispensation in terms of the hours of that door, because it was a full-blown bar. I wouldn't be wanting to relax it. If it's a function venue that's occasional, as was what I had understood, then there might be some support from me for some relaxation.
Or does it make sense to modify it, including the terms of referral, that we get clarification on the use? Would that just work some words for that? So if we're happy for the officers to add some words to that effect, is any further discussion? You don't have to wait for the words, are you happy? Okay, so we'll read back the alteration.
So as worded in the additional documents, just with the addition of and for clarification on the use of the space.
Okay, all happy with that? So I'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the referral? It's unanimous, thank you. Item 3, 142 Edmund Street. Councillor Graham has declared an interest and is leaving the room. The officer's recommendation is for approval. It's a single house on a rear lot. The address is Edmund Street, but the application faces Mardy Street, is it? At the back. I'll move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Groom. Any discussion? Councillor Groom.
This is an interesting proposal. I think there's been enough roof decks now that the committee know that I really struggle with them. I struggle with the overlooking impacts and also the noise impacts. But the proponent has done everything they can to make sure this is compliant, and I can't find planning grounds to refuse on the basis of the roof deck. And similarly, the whole scheme has made itself as compliant as possible. So there are very few grounds to refuse it. And there are some things I like about it. I actually like the treatment to Mardy Street that doesn't present yet another double car garage to the street, that the front of the house comes forward of the garage and actually creates a really interesting precedent for further development on that street if it were to occur. Some, quite urbanised infill form could take place over time. I'm very sympathetic that the neighbours sense that this is a big house in a small lot, because it is, but it's ticked all the boxes to be the house that it is on the street, and it is an unusually small lot that the proponent has had to deal with. So I've done some soul searching about this, but I've actually landed at a point that I feel that we have to approve it, given the nature of the R codes that we're assessing it against.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation for approval? That's unanimous, thank you. Room. Item 4. Item 4 is 5 Manning Street, two-storey additions and alterations. The recommendation is for refusal. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lorver. Any discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks. As I asked the applicant, I am wondering whether there is any appetite from them to consider variations. It did rather seem like they weren't too sure what the process was, and that we might just, turn it around and give it an approval or the like. But I guess the question really is whether it's close, or whether it's so significantly far from being approvable. It's a really difficult building because of the shape of it, the L shape of it, and it's the return veranda and the fact that you look down the side. Most of the other buildings in that street are built almost boundary to boundary. They're minimal side setbacks, and they've got a reasonable roof covering the front 2 or front 4 rooms, and that's sort of allowed them to build their big 2-story additions behind in virtually the same sort of location that this applicant has put theirs, but because of the particular nature of their building, it logically did raise sort of heritage concerns from the heritage crew. So it's kind of a hard one, because if you were applying the sort of basic rule of that the tick and flick approach that we've sort of developed with our streetscape policy of saying, oh, well, if it's 10 metres further back or whatever, then, tick and flick sort of thing. So it almost sort of passes the tick and flick kind of approach, but I get that it doesn't pass the individual nuanced heritage approach. So I'm sort of struggling to know what is the right version of this, whether if it was at least another 2 metres back where the addition started at the point at which the house doglegs, would that be adequate? I'm struggling to know whether if it was perhaps a less contrasting architectural style, was perhaps a little bit more underplayed, and not as demanding that it have, obviously what is a particular sort of design ethos for the designer and or the view of how sustainability should be for the applicant, with clear story windows and the like. But they're all things that are contributing to the reason that the reasonable recommendation for refusal has come forward. And I sort of, I'm struggling with whether or not we should defer it, to allow the applicant the opportunity to revise it. I guess the easiest way would be to end up having it go up to full council so that the applicant perhaps can have a bit more of a conversation, because they and myself were basically phone surfing for the last 3 days. They wanted to speak to me to give them a bit of an understanding about the process. I wasn't able to do that, and so they didn't come along with anything saying we would be prepared to modify anything. So maybe that's the best approach, but I'll see what others have to say.
Councillor Lang.
Thanks. If there was a referral, or if we did send it up to full council, I would be in support of that. Echoing some of the comments Councillor Sullivan made, I do feel that the applicant didn't fully understand the process. And something else I did note, which is not really in the planning policy, though the applicant and the neighbour were sitting together and conversing. So that's important to me, that they've got a good relationship, and I'm hopeful that maybe we could work with the applicant and get something that we are okay with, and importantly, that neighbour on the southern boundary is okay with. So if there was a referral or we're sending it to full council, I'd support that.
Can I suggest perhaps the best way to proceed is to support the officer's recommendation and then refer it to council, so there's a clear message about what the decision is, so that then at council we refer it for reconsideration. Is that clear? So we support the refusal, send it to council, don't use delegated authority, and then at council propose a deferral. Does that make sense? I'm just thinking if we defer it now, it might give them reason to believe that they're very close to an approval. Does that make sense? Happy to take feedback.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a convoluted process, and I'd rather defer it and tell them why, and trust that the officers can have that conversation. But you know, if that's the way the rest of the committee want to go,
I'm just making that suggestion.
I mean,
Any further comments?
I guess my sense about this, and I note the reference that everyone else in the street's done it, but most of the other lots in the street are larger lots. And so if we have a look at that street, people have been able to do the kind of scale of development that these proponents are suggesting, but they have a larger lot to do it on. And my sense is, given the built form and the size of the lot and its relationship to the southern neighbour, is that what they're proposing is too big. And that needs to be part of the consideration. It's not just adjusting a window or a roof angle or something or other. It's actually reconsidering or getting some better, more efficient design, because it's not an efficient design solution that's been put forward that accommodates their needs in a kind of a footprint that works better for the size of the site.
So you would prefer us to refer it to council now? There's no possibility of the applicants making changes before council. It's just for them.
Refer it back to the administration.
Okay.
To consider this, and this.
Not involved in council. Okay.
Yeah.
So would you like to move that way?
Yep. Okay. I'll move that way.
So can we draw up a referral to the administration to liaise with the applicants? And that's seconded by Councillor Lang. Thank you. Any further discussion while we're waiting for the words? Can you read that out, please?
Refer the application to the administration with the advice that the council is not prepared to grant planning approval to the application for the two-storey additions and alterations at Manning Street based on the current submitted plans, and invite the applicant prior to the next appropriate planning committee meeting to consider submitting an amended proposal to reconsider the bulk and scale of the additions, impact on the southern lot and the impact on the heritage dwelling.
Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan? Ready to? I thought it's been moved and seconded. Yep. Okay. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Graham against. That's carried. Item 5, 12 Dow Street, single-storey house, recommended for approval. Move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lawver. Any discussion? No. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6, Elizabeth Street, Wycombe Valley, additions and alterations, recommended for approval. I move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Groom, would you like to speak on that?
I've got a question first, and it's about the height of the carport. One of the neighbours raised that, and it is unusually and perhaps unnecessarily high. And I was Just wondering whether we have any information on that. It's probably about a boat, but
through the chair, in short, no information, but typically it's for those bigger structures. Sometimes people like the look of a higher carport as well, or have four-wheel drives, but I'd only be assuming at this stage.
But it is correct that our scheme does have, we won't call it a maximum height, an ideal height, or some constraints around the height of an open carport?
Only where it's not set back from the street.
Okay, any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 7 is a council decision and amendments to the local planning policy 1.9 regarding the design advisory committee. Move the officer's recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Lorver. Any discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
No, it's okay. It's going to council.
It's going to council anyway, yes. Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous and it's going to council. Item 8. Adjustments to local heritage survey and heritage list adjustments relating to J-Loo Flats and Knutsford Street warehouses. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Graham. Anybody wish to speak?
I'll speak just briefly. I won't typically support the lifting of the heritage listing on the Queen Street properties, but I do have a lot of sympathy for it being downgraded from a 2 to a 3. But I also just, I kind of accept that a really good proposal could come forward with demolition. And that makes it a really hard thing for me to deal with. But I also accept that having a heritage listing doesn't necessarily stop good development from coming forward. The problem in this instance is that it has so far. It's stopped the 2 properties, the Fanos one and the old 4 terraces. There have been opportunities where one person would buy both of them and redevelop them and the like. So it has become a difficult one in terms of redevelopment. But I struggle to see that as for me, for someone that actually still believes that the listing should stay in place, that that we should lift the listing purely on economic redevelopment grounds. And I also accept that probably very few people see the heritage in that building. I don't actually believe the heritage in those buildings has a lot to do with sort of mid-century design. I think it's been a fairly reasonable argument that if you were worried about its mid-century design credentials, you probably should be looking for much better examples of mid-century design. But for me, having been through the buildings multiple times, back and front, up and down, seeing that it is pretty much one of 2 terrace buildings left inside the city centre area from that area, where there were many, many more previously. So I struggle with the notion that we're not going to be able to, in the future, see some interpretation of those heritage Victorian terrace houses in the fabric going forward. I almost wonder in my mind whether the sort of building that Petroni did in Henry Street, where you effectively have a ruin that tells you everything you need to know about the past of that site, being a colonial building, and everything you need to know about the future of the West End, being a modern and exceptional example of converting it to residential. So they do exist, and it is possible. And it's just that people haven't had the imagination to do it in this instance, but it's all there to do. And so I do struggle. I will think about it a bit more between now and full council, and I wanted to raise this now because I am really struggling with it, and I might come back with an amendment, or I might just give up and let it go through to the keeper because I'm not sure that anybody else would support that perspective.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So this is a council item. If people want to make amendments, they can do it between now and council. I see all those in favour. All those against. Councillor Sullivan against. That's carried. Information report. Any questions on the information report? Kind of move that we receive the information report. And seconder, Councillor Graham. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 11, motions without notice. With notice, there are none. Urgent business, none. Late items, none. Confidential business, none. Close the meeting at 8:41. Thank you for your attendance.